Hey, Ashley, this is Friday. We've been goofing around with my virtual backgrounds. People can't see me on the podcast. But,
that might be a good thing.
Yeah. Right now I have like a Mario kind of Nintendo background, but I was like before that in a shirt pocket, popping my head out.
This is how we started. We started our call today. So that sets the tone for y'all.
I guess maybe the tone I'm trying to set is like maybe I'm in the metaverse, because the first story or two is like about food metaverses. So that makes sense.
I mean, it's a good segue, so I'll give you that.
So the first story that I want to talk about is just this gold rush land grab around trademarks by the big food brands around Web3 and metaverse stuff. I had seen an article posted on LinkedIn about how Kraft and Wendy's were doing metaverse stuff, and I just started to dig in, and I saw like this huge rush by all these guys, and it's kind of following a pattern where they're all filing for trademark protection around their brand in the metaverse. And what happens is oftentimes they file these trademarks, and then there's this pattern you see in the crypto press where a trademark lawyer will tweet about it. There's a couple trademark lawyers that follow this stuff pretty closely. They'll tweet, hey, Kraft is filed for trademark protection, and then in the metaverse and Web3, and then some crypto news blog will write, Kraft is about to enter the metaverse. Yeah. Or Panera is about to enter the metaverse. And you can't necessarily blame them a lot of times, like, because Panera filed a trademark called the Paneraverse. Yeah. I was bugging my son yesterday because he actually is my son is working at Panda Express, and Panda Express has apparently trademarked the Pandaverse. Mm. And of course we know Wendy's has trademarked the Wendyverse. So right. On one hand, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. But on the other hand, like, there's not a lot of creativity. And I just feel like a lot of these guys are just trying to cover their bases in case they ever want to do anything.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is what like used to happen with URLs, and back when like new domains would pop up and websites where, like everybody had to have their .com, .org, .net, like all of the different iterations so that you protected your brand. And this is pretty much that, except in the metaverse. Like, companies are increasingly worried, and rightfully so. I think if you're in brand, if that's like your job to protect your brand, you're thinking about all of the different places that your customers are migrating to. And obviously Web3, although very early days, is going to be it's going to have a huge impact on consumer behavior, consumer spending, and shopping and all of that. And like, it makes sense that they would be thinking about like, how do we make sure that nobody takes advantage of whatever and does something with the Panera name, and then prevents us from sort of owning that real estate. And honestly, I think you're right. Like, you get these stories out there that all of a sudden this brand has this like big metaverse strategy. I admit, like, when I first started writing about this stuff, I felt to that. Like, I would see a story and I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, let's write about how this new brand is doing it. But then when you dig a little bit, you realize like, no, there's actually not any there. Like, I talked to, not on the record, but I talked to a pretty big fast food, chain that had this happen. Like, they had filed patents or trademarks rather. And then all of a sudden they were reported to be in the metaverse, and the team that is working on their Web3 strategy internally, like, he was like, we're still forming it. Like, it's a very, very early, like, we're still trying to wrap our arms around what this is even going to mean for our company. So it's like a good kind of cautionary, like, yes, all of these companies are thinking about it, trying to protect themselves, but in terms of like that actually turning into a full-blown channel for them to sell through, or to, I don't think a lot of them even know how they're going to use the metaverse, how it's going to impact. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see, but it's doesn't mean much yet just because someone has a trademark.
Now, some are moving faster than others.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wendysverse is kind of funny, but they've actually already set up virtual stake in essentially a virtual world. They're working with a virtual world partner. They've had a couple announcements where if you sign up to go to their virtual world, you actually can get a free hamburger or whatever, chicken burger, with purchase. And so some of these guys are moving faster than others. On the other hand, there's some, like, for example, there's Instant Brands, the maker of the Instant Pot. Mm-hmm. I was searching. They actually did a trademark filing where they're basically saying, hey, we want to be able to use our Instant Brand Connect brand, which is their app, in the metaverse. So it makes sense to me at some point. Like maybe I could see a use case where you'd want to use your Instant Pot in the metaverse, but it's a little further fetched. So they're probably taking a little more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think gamifying the consumer experience with brands has been a thing for a long time, and I think the metaverse. I think people the most natural extension right now is like give people another place to interact with our brand and have fun, and maybe give them incentives that they can utilize in an in-person experience. Like grocery stores have done this for a long time with, like, I don't know if you've ever done like collect the Monopoly squares on your receipt and like return your little Monopoly card to get whatever. Like there are these stupid. I never ever play those games because I lose everything, and so there's literally no point. But it is, it's like one step below like a rewards card. Like it's interaction, engagement. It brings people back in to collect certain things. So that is low-hanging fruit to me. Like that seems like a natural way that brands would start to interact and make. I mean, one of the brands in your story, I think you wrote about, like there's, they created like a video game essentially in their metaverse experience, and like as of right now, that's the tech that exists. That's what it supports, and that's how you can sort of get your consumers in the mix, like give them something to do, and it's not just like come see a virtual restaurant and like walk around. Like there has to be some there beyond the cool factor of like that first thing, because nobody's ever going to come back or do anything unless you've got some way to engage and make it fun and entertaining. Because you're not certainly serving food in the metaverse as we
not yet.
We know, not yet.
It's not just restaurant companies. Miller and Budweiser, two beer companies, have applied trademarks, or they've filed for trademarks for metaverse applications. Mars, the maker of Snickers, has. Kraft, the maker of Velveeta. Mm-hmm. I want to see how we can maybe use some Velveeta in the metaverse. That's kind of an interesting use case. Chuck E. Cheese. Like, I actually mentioned that to my son. Like, he goes, I want to join. Like, immediately he's like, well, that makes sense. So, like, Chuck E. Cheese is a gaming-centric, like, restaurant brand. Yeah. Like, I could see, like, some really obvious early use cases, particularly around the kind of that gaming that you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like, everybody is... There's also, of course, I can't think... Oh, Slim Jim. I was trying to think of, like, what is the brand? Slim Jim had a big... I think I actually wrote about it, like, a month or two ago. Had a big push. And for them, it was, like they created their own little like character out of like they sort of created like a model. I don't know if it was an NFT or just sort of a virtual world inside the metaverse. I can't really remember, but at any rate, like they did a ton of marketing on social media. They had like a big TikTok push, and like they had the campaign in of itself was a huge success. Like there was a write up about it in like a big marketing tech publication. Like it was like a really great way for them to sort of use an omnichannel approach. And it's Slim Jim. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? Like
it's a meat stick.
It's a meat stick.
Why would you want to go to the metaverse and have a chomp on the meat stick?
I mean, it's like we could have a whole episode about.
Yeah. I should say, like, perusing through these trademark applications, a lot of them are just boilerplate language, right? I think there's some like cut and paste boilerplate language that a lot of these guys are using, saying, hey, we want to be able to do something in virtual worlds. A lot of them are throwing around the term NFTs. So it's not a lot of them are using the term Web3. I think a lot of it's like saying, hey, we could go into virtual worlds and do something with our brand. We also want to be able to do NFTs, and then they'll go into some descriptors around saying, hey, we can maybe use this as part of a loyalty program, or part as a way to offer virtual goods, and maybe or an NFT that could be exchanged for real world goods. So they're covering a lot of their bases, and a lot of times it's just boilerplate language. Some of the times they're going actually into pretty deep descriptions around what looks to be like their plans.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty varied degree of stuff happening around trademarking.
Yeah. We'll have to see kind of how people do start to roll these things out too. And like, I think NFTs we have another NFT story coming up, but NFTs are becoming like sort of a hotter term now. And there's a lot of contention around like the gimmicks around NFTs and like, are they real and are they, and so if I was working for a brand, I think I would you want to be able to protect your brand. You want to be able to put out there sort of a land grab for what you want to own, but be careful with the messaging and language so that you're not, just jumping onto a trend and like throwing out all these buzzwords, and then, consumers just sort of roll their eyes and are like, whatever. So I think that, brands have to be a little careful there and figure out what, and to your point, nobody's really using Web3. I think Web3 is like a great B2B term, like industry wise, we're talking about a technology revolution, and that's happening. And it's not just the metaverse, it's not just NFTs, it's not just blockchain. Like it's the conglomeration of all of these different technologies and the way they're changing. So
you tease this next story, and it's actually a story in Eater, and kind of to the point that NFTs are becoming more talked about and more buzzy. We're seeing certainly more people write about them, and some of the language is pretty funny. There's an Eater article that actually talks about a new NFT restaurant in San Francisco called the Show Group Restaurant. It's basically Show, SHO. With what's that little line over the O?
Like, I knew you were going to ask me that. I knew you were going to ask me that. I just had this feeling, and I should have been Googling it ahead of time. I don't know. But
the Eater article basically describes NFTs as little digital bits of the blockchain. That's how they describe them. I was like, this is the first time this journalist has written about NFTs, apparently, because her descriptor of them are little digital bits of the blockchain. But she goes on to describe how the Show Club is basically going to be using different tiers. It's a membership-driven concept, which we've talked about. They do mention Flyfish Group, which I kind of feel like the Show Group concept is basically pretty much a direct knockoff.
Yeah.
Of the Flyfish Group. And I expected that. When we started writing about the Flyfish Group, I said that they're setting a template for other restaurants. And it looks like Show Group kind of cut and pasted this template, and they're basically just doing it on the opposite coast of New York. A little bit different tiers, but it's a Japanese-themed restaurant. They actually have a premium room, omakase room, I think. That's how you say it. Maybe I got that wrong, but they're basically using a lot of the same language.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, social clubs for NFTs make more sense, I think, right now than a lot of other things, because it's not just it lends itself to more lifetime value. Like if you're becoming a member, particularly of something that, I mean, it is a gamble because you don't know what the future will hold. You don't know the longevity of whatever you're buying into. But if it pays off, you could potentially have what seems like maybe expensive to some people, but the tiers are like $7,500, $15,000, $30,000. Again, not inexpensive by any means. However, if it really does stick around for the long haul and it becomes exclusive and elite, and they have great, insider deals and rewards and concert tickets and reservations and like all of these perks, and you have that forever. That it's actually a really good price for something like that, but you're betting on the fact that that's all going to work out. All their promises are going to come to fruition. And so, but they're also targeting people with expendable, disposable income who can drop, which is exactly what Flyfish is doing. It's more elite, it's more exclusive. And you're betting on the organizers, you're betting on their background, you're betting on the idea catching on, and I think I don't think these are the only two we're going to see. I think we're going to keep seeing more and more pop up in different cities.
Yeah. This one, there's some details in the Eater article about the different tiers. They're called Earth, Water, Fire. I think they missed an opportunity called Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I feel like somebody maybe wanted to, and they were like, "No,
fire." I think there's a high-end, super ultra one high-end membership. I think that's maybe Fire, 300,000. Get you like a special trip to Japan, but the more earthly tiers, the more kind of baseline, are $7,500. There's about 3,265 of those. The group was founded with a chef and also a guy named Josh Siegel, which some of you who are deep into the world of food tech and smart kitchen may remember from some of the Spoons writing. He was a co-founder of Init. Do you remember Josh from Init?
Yeah.
And so, but it's interesting. They made a lot of progress, though. They actually apparently have negotiated for this restaurant to actually sit atop the Salesforce Transit Center, which is apparently a giant multi-billion-dollar development happening in San Francisco. And they've actually negotiated for this thing to kind of be a restaurant kind of near the top of that. And of course, there's two Eater articles. One of them talks about the backers, which include the CEO of Twilio, can't pronounce it, the founder of Velocity, the CEO of DocuSign, and Drew Houston, the CEO of Dropbox, apparently all have put money into this thing. So it's not just a bunch of folks putting money in via NFTs, kind of the hoi polloi. Apparently there's some big money behind it.
Yeah. I when I was reading the Eater article, the one thing that stood out to me was like, I hadn't really heard of the development, the Salesforce development either in San Francisco, but probably a lot of folks who are listening may have heard of like the housing crisis and debates that are happening around, San Francisco and Silicon Valley in general becoming incredibly unaffordable, and very like that tech has really done a number on the communities there. And all I could think was like, this is really the other end of the spectrum that we've seen from NFTs. Like we've seen NFTs in the restaurant world, like had help entrepreneurs raise money for their new restaurants, or raise money. Like we've heard, Chef Spike Mendelsohn came on to one of our events and talked about like how this was a way, during the pandemic, they felt like they really had to figure out, new models and really reinvent themselves. And he said, like, we feel like the culinary community got left behind in Web 2, and we're determined not to have that happen to us in Web 3 and not be so behind in, digital engagement with our communities. And so you've got like that NFT world, and then you've got this NFT world, which makes a lot of sense, is very compelling, but is also like it's the sort of elitism, like this social club that's going to attract the CEOs and the tech elite and whatnot. So it's just interesting, like how NFTs are being branded and what the general population is going to think of them and what they're going to associate them with. And if I was an average Joe and I didn't know about this world and I read the Eater article, I would just be like, see, crypto NFT, like these are just for like, rich tech dudes. Like this isn't relevant to me. You know what I'm saying? Like it sort of is, it's furthering that a little bit. So, but again, I think that the idea of getting people to buy into this like social club that they have access to through an NFT the social club isn't a new idea. It's just sort of like how you get people to like come in and build excitement for stuff. So,
a lot of what you're saying kind of echoes what Kristen Hawley talked about, I think, when she wrote about Flyfish. I mean, I think one of the things I'm interested to watch is how these guys perform. When I look at what Vaynerchuk did, Gary Vee, with Flyfish, they had a couple benefits. One, they were a first driver advantage, really kind of the first one to do a high-end exclusive restaurant membership. But also, Gary Vee has millions of followers on social media, and because of that, he's also been hugely active in the NFT and crypto space.
Yeah.
So that just created a groundswell of momentum for when they announced Flyfish. I don't think necessarily that the show club benefits from that.
Right.
I don't think there's a large influencer that's going to be pushing this to millions of folks. I also don't know necessarily if they have the ties into the crypto community. They also aren't a first driver. But maybe they're also not counting on all the money, because apparently they have some big tech backers, but I'm just kind of curious to see how their NFT performs.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point of like where the location matters a bit. I think in San Francisco and with the tech world, like you've just got maybe a bigger network of folks who are more savvy and know more about, and feel more comfortable. Maybe they're crypto investors already, and so I think whereas in New York, having a larger name attached to sort of get more publicity and sort of whether it's, I think we'll see more of these with like celebrity chefs. Like I think there has to be a hook for them to catch on, and those can be a couple different things, I think. But yeah, you're right. This is a little less of a name play and a little more, I think, of an insider, like tech insider world or whatnot. And yes, I enjoy Kristen Hawley's writings on this and in Expedite. Like she actually tweeted yesterday, I think, about this story, and said the same thing, like, this is just what we need, more social clubs to restrict access to restaurants that everybody should be able to go to. Like, yeah, there's always going to be places that not everybody can afford. There's always going to be high-end restaurants. There's always going to be, clubs that have really high, that you have to know someone to even get past the door. Like that's always existed. That always will exist. And hopefully the world of NFTs will continue to span the gamut and allow people at different levels to still invest and get it. I think the most exciting thing about NFTs and the metaverse and crypto in general is like, yes, it is volatile, but I mean, if you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk talk about it, like it's also a huge opportunity. Like there's so much left to do and to be built and to be created that it is exciting, even though there's a lot of uncertainty in how things will play out. There'll be a lot of winners. There'll be a lot of losers. Whether or not the social club is winner or loser, who knows? Yeah,
I mean, I think like looking at what we just talked about with like Wendy's, right? And like what Adam Broadman is talking about, like by using NFTs as a reward for your loyal customers at the corner restaurant. Mm-hmm. I think NFTs aren't necessarily just for like exclusive memberships. They're going to be used at QSRs.
Yeah.
They'll be used at kind of the family restaurant as part of a loyalty program or a way to just like, hey, I want to buy access to like hamburgers for the next year. So we'll see. And this is one we'll keep an eye on. But I want to move on to the next story, which I wrote about. I think a lot of people have seen over the past maybe 6 months the troubles that a lot of the ultra fast or 15-minute grocery companies are starting to have. The GoPuffs, the Jokers, and I always kind of I start to laugh when I start saying their names. I think there's one called Wheezy.
Yep.
A lot of these companies are starting to struggle, and I really started thinking about this a little more deeply when I wrote about the article last week where Joker was basically shutting down its North American operations. So I wrote an article early this week about how really these companies, or particularly the backers of these companies, didn't learn the lessons of the early internet, where we saw Webvan and we saw Home Grocer and Cosmo all raise hundreds of millions of dollars, largely based on the pitch that at some point most people do their food shopping online, and these companies all went out of business. Now, granted, it's 20 years later, but I still think like if you start to look at the pitches of these companies, there's some underlying premises that I think were somewhat questionable. Because I think that the large pitch for these guys is, hey, consumers want convenience, and they'll pay for convenience. That may be true, but if I'm in a dense urban environment like where most of these guys are operating, I'm usually within a block or two of like a convenience store. Yeah. So what do you think of this? Like these GoPuff, Joker, etc. Will these guys survive, or was the underlying premises behind these companies like bad?
I think the thing that I struggle to understand like if I was being pitched. If I was one of the Joker investors or whatever sitting in a room, the thing that I would ask is like, I don't necessarily understand what the huge differential is between you and Postmates or DoorDash or whatever in an urban environment, because right now you can get, or Instacart or whatever it is, like you can get so much delivered to your door with these existing services, and then you can also get online delivery from regular grocery stores pretty quickly now too. Like whereas it used to be that delivery and online ordering or whatever wasn't at your fingertips all the time. It is now. Like the last time I went to New York, I don't even know how many things I had DoorDash to my hotel room, like over for realizing I forgot stuff. Like I think I had like a curling iron, like some lunch, and then like later some like an ice cream truck in the after. Like I just kept coffee the next morning. Like I was just like living via, and that already exists. So like I don't.
Were you afraid to leave your room?
I know. I had a bunch of stuff I was working on, and I was like, I didn't have anything to do until the next
ice cream,
day.
coffee?
Yes, I was just like, I'm going to be a shut-in for 24 hours. I'm also a mom who I never get left alone. So like to be in a solo room, like just leave the food at my door. I don't even want to see another person's face now. But like, I guess that's the thing that I think is interesting is like to your point, like so much money was poured into the space, and yet obviously the logistics are still difficult in an urban, highly populated, dense environment. How that type of environment could ever exist outside of that environment is also questionable. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I just don't. It's what hole are we filling? And obviously we're not filling it well either. So it's an odd space.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, delivery companies are logistics companies, right? And we've watched Amazon and Walmart over the past 10 years, like seriously invest in home delivery of everything.
Yes.
I mean, I can order something through Amazon Fresh and probably get it within an hour. Yeah. And then you mentioned the delivery centric companies like Uber and DoorDash and Postmates, these are logistic companies with different approaches than Amazon and Walmart, but like, hey, they have like this on-demand flexible workforce using gig economy economics to kind of get stuff to your door pretty quickly. And so these other companies basically had to play catch up, and because of that, they had to take funding that were seriously, a lot of money. So GoPuff, I think, was founded in 2013. They actually had some early success because I think they were a bit of a first arriver. But they were starting to raise in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and kind of that late stage capital is some serious money. But what's surprising is like you saw the Gorillas and Joker and all these guys starting to get hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think it reports that about $4.4+ billion was invested in the sector in 2021 alone, which is just crazy.
Mind blowing, yeah. It's insane. Well, and like, so if you think about what that money has to be spent on, what it probably was spent on, like, you've got to build out. If you're talking a 15 minute window, ultra fast, right? You're talking about needing fulfillment centers and networks so strategically placed and close together, or like the logistics of that are mind blowing in and of themselves. And the thing that they're up against that when, again, the companies like Postmates and DoorDash or whatever are leveraging, the gig economy labor with existing infrastructure in the communities that it's serving. Like, it's not, DoorDash isn't trying to like go around and seek, like, how do we get this to them fast? We have to have this here and this here and this here. They're just like, here are the stores in your area. What do you want from them? Like, this is how long it will take based on where they are. Like, it's such an easier deployment model than we're going to get you this stuff in 15 minutes, and we've got to build out these networks in every single city and these fulfillment centers and these, like, the infrastructure is wild. So I don't know. It's not really surprising that it's been very challenging for them. Yeah.
And even traditional e-grocery, like grocery delivery, I think isn't hugely profitable. I mean, I think even for like Walmarts of the world, I think where grocery delivery works is within an omni-channel context, right? So your Walmart, or now even Amazon, and certainly Kroger, you have both physical places of business where people can walk to, but also then you have the delivery option, and the food is sourced at the same place, so you don't have to build out separate locations.
Exactly.
Walmart can utilize their existing location and just have delivery from there. So I think it's just really challenging. These aren't super fat margins we're talking about. So like, if you're Walmart and Amazon and Kroger, you can withstand that. But I think if you're these other guys, like, it's all going to be venture capital for the first 10 years to get kind of burn through it.
Well, I don't know if you remember when Amazon bought Whole Foods. I remember sitting in on that, the call that they did, the investor call they did, where they announced it. And I remember them talking about the fact that Amazon is in the red constantly with their delivery service, particularly food with their fresh business, and they felt like the investment into Whole Foods was at least going to help them, be more competitive in the omni-channel market with Walmart and Kroger's and others, because they didn't before. They were purely online. They didn't have a spot where they were going for physical foods and, fresh foods. You couldn't really get a lot of fresh foods. So I think, like, if Amazon was recognizing that they need an omnichannel approach, Amazon, and realizing that they're always probably going to take losses when it comes to most of their delivery business, how is anybody else, the regular size company or startup or a new entrant to the market, going to survive that? Like, it just... The numbers don't math, as my 9-year-old likes to say to me.
I don't math. Well, speaking of like long gestating businesses like grocery delivery, another long gestating business is the world of video streaming. We all are familiar with. I'm a user of Roku, and I've talked to the CEO of Roku, Anthony Wood. For those of you who don't know, he's also the guy who helped invent the DVR. So a pretty iconic guy. Mm. So he's always pioneering, and Roku's always pioneering. And there is a food story angle here, in that they just announced that they are partnering with Walmart to do TV shopping. So basically, you're watching a show on the Roku channel, and a commercial comes up, and you could click on your remote and actually have something put into a basket. You could check out with Roku Pay, which is like an Apple Pay for Roku, and have it delivered. And I thought, well, they're obviously partnering with Walmart can enable food delivery. And what was interesting when I started to dig into the story is like just about a month before, they've also announced a huge swath of new food-centric programming where they're partnering with Martha Stewart, Emeril Lagasse, and Christopher Kimball. And I think they have a slate of 7 new original shows, which they own all the IP for. And I could just imagine with all this new shows, they're going to have like tons of cooking content on the Roku channel.
Yep.
And I could just see them like enabling, hey, here's Martha Stewart's new holiday recipe. Just click buy and we'll have it delivered to your home. I could just see that happening.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a natural extension of like the shoppable recipe online and what digital recipes have become on the internet, and also just like online commerce in general, right? Like you have so many business models now online content is driven by clickable, like you're reading an article, it's not necessarily an advertisement that you're reading. It's interesting and it has interesting information that you care about, but like also there are links that are affiliate links or whatever. You click them and you're able to buy the thing that you were reading about or get suggested things that you might also like. And I mean, so that's been, we've been living in that forever. The algorithms follow us around and know everything about us. And obviously what we've seen is that native content and particularly video content are more and more and more what you have to have as a brand, because otherwise people aren't reading long stories. They're not clicking through heavily worded text. Like they want, we want TikToks of everything basically. So, Roku is, I think they're stepping up to the plate saying, well, if we create, I wouldn't be surprised if the programming is, shorter, like as opposed to the traditional cooking show where you've got like 45 minutes of like the Ina Garten and what's her show, the something Contessa. I'm gonna get hate mail for this. I don't even know what it's called, but like the old school Food Network model or HGTV model of shows where like you're sitting watching through commercials and half hour 45 minutes of like someone creating a couple different things or whatever. Like you can see where the online version of that with shoppability is probably going to be much tighter and maybe focusing on one or two things and then giving the consumer the option to like go and take action and get that thing, delivered to your door in a half an hour. And like the cool thing about that is it's creating this sort of new model of engagement for a consumer, connecting them to, whatever their local grocery stores and however they're going to get food. But it's also creating, like, it's helping solve the, like, what's for dinner problem. Like, it's creating kind of a different way for consumers in the kitchen to solve, like, I'm not sitting there looking it up and I'm not, like, Googling or whatever. It's like, it's being delivered to me and it's giving me the option to, like, really almost passively decide what I'm going to serve that night or the next day or whatever. So it's really, I'm super fascinated by this. I'm interested to see how it plays out and how they actually execute the shoppability on screen. We as consumers largely consume cooking content in 2 primary formats today. Like one is through social media. Like I can't tell you, I'm like becoming a teenage kid. Like I basically like, I'll see a TikTok now. I literally cooked something I saw on TikTok the other day. Like I'm like, what am I doing? Like, am I like a teenage kid? Like I'm cooking, whatever. But I also think there are people who want more immersive content. I want to watch a 25-minute show. That's largely coming through streaming today. I mean, I think the dinosaur in all this is just linear programming over cable. But I think on demand streaming shows, I think Roku's smart here. Roku has, I think, 60 million or plus households or so that use a Roku device. Now, a much smaller percentage that use the Roku channel. But I quite honestly, I'd never really gone on the Roku channel until like I read the story and I went on. I'm like, hey, that's pretty good stuff. Like I was actually, do you use Roku? No, actually I don't. We have all Prime sticks or whatever. But people who do use Roku are like big fans. Like they're doing something right because they've got a lot of fans out there. I kind of root for them, right? Like they're not Amazon, they're not Apple, they're not Google, and they're not Comcast. Like they're this little company by this guy who started invented DVR, and they're like punching above their weight. So I have like a couple of Rokus in my house, and that's what I kind of standardize it on. But I just think they're tending to kind of be fairly creative, and I think they have I think $700 million or so in the last quarter was based on advertising revenue. So I can see them. It's not just like the hardware they're selling. They're actually getting a lot of revenue through things like this. And I think this will just feed into adding to that. Yeah. I think you're right. The only thing that as far as I can tell, that Amazon offers and that Roku doesn't, and I wonder how this will work. Like, we have of course, the name of the device escapes me, but the Alexa device that sits in the kitchen, the Echo Show, we had an old one, now we have a new one or whatever, and that actually is like our primary. Like, I watch YouTube stuff on there and like recipe stuff, or I constantly asking questions about like converting measurements and what's a good substitute for X, Y, and Z. And Roku doesn't have a device like that, so the only downside I think is like, whereas you could potentially bring more of that content into the kitchen directly, they'll be relying on third-party, either TVs that have Roku baked inside, or I suppose on like an iPad or something, or a mobile device in the kitchen. But that's the interesting thing about cooking content in general, I think, is like where are you consuming it, and like where does it become more whatever. But in this case, like, it's not necessarily even teaching. The point here is not necessarily like walking you step by step. It's not a guided recipe play. It's a shoppable recipe play. So in that case, it might be okay that you're like watching it in the other, living room or whatever, and like hitting shop because it's something you're going to make later. You're not necessarily watching it to make together. You're watching it and then you're waiting for the ingredients to come. So that part might actually work out. They're not physically in the kitchen when the content's being watched. But I think that's kind of another interesting angle.
Well, the last story of the day I want to talk about is actually based on some of the stuff we're doing here. I wrote a story last week basically asking who are the leaders of the food tech revolution. And that's kind of one of the things we're asking here, because we actually want to crowdsource ideas for that and announce some of the people who the industry sees as leaders in the space at our Food Tech Leaders Forum in November. And I'm super excited about this. We could kind of talk about the broader Spoon series of events, but I think one of the things I just think is worth celebrating is just like there's so many innovative people in the space, and it's not just like in alternative proteins. It's in food waste reduction.
Yeah,
it's in digital platforms. It's in the future of the consumer kitchen. So we basically have put out a call to action and asked people to kind of give us ideas of who they think are the leaders in the space.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's our first, leadership people-centric award. And in fact, the Food Tech Leaders Forum is kind of our first people-centric event. And what I mean by that is, like, there'll be great content and there'll be great, pieces, like reasons to come. But part of why we're doing this is because as we get back to in-person, thinking about like what do people miss about the in-person events? What have people always come to the Smart Kitchen Summit and our events for? And in large part, the feedback we've always gotten is like the programming is great. Yes, we learn a ton, but like the networking, the people meeting, the collaboration, like time and time again, we get, and we've seen deals come out of our events and people who met each other that, now are doing great things in their companies, or started a company, or someone got acquired, or we've heard so many of those stories. And Food Tech Leaders Forum is really like a sort of rebirth of that, of bringing people together across industries and areas that all play in that big food tech umbrella. And the award is designed to, like Mike said, really bring out, who is driving this forward, and like what is your vision for the future, and like why do you do this work? And because there are really inspiring things happening. So we've already gotten so many great nominations, and if you go to the website, the spoon.tech/Food Tech Leaders Forum, you actually will see, you can get tickets to the event. You also see information on how to sponsor, and you'll see a link to nominate for the award, which will be given live at the event. So it's super exciting, and I can't wait to, really see all of the different nominations. And it's what do we say? We're open until August 15th, so you've got most of the summer to brainstorm and submit, folks. And you can submit yourself too, so don't be shy.
Yeah, I think like a lot of food tech events under the broader category of food tech tend to be fairly specific to one topic.
Yeah.
Like it's there's a lot of silos, right? I think, and there's a benefit to that. Like you can go to like an event on alternative proteins and maybe see everyone in that space, but when you start to get like these casual collisions between people in different spaces, like someone who's kind of developing the future of consumer cooking talks to someone in alternative proteins, you might see a deal spin out of that and saying, hey, we want to help you bake make plant-based food at home.
Yeah.
When you start talking to people innovating around food waste reduction, and you see them talk to someone who's leading kind of a next generation retailer, you may see like something happen around, hey, we're going to do an initiative using this technology to reduce food waste. So we're super excited about that. We're going to have leaders in Web3. And I think everyone's interested in what can you do in Web3 for our business. And so I'm super excited to have some of the leaders come and talk about what they're building, because really this is an industry, a series of industries built on people with great ideas. And like to a person and to the industry, everyone's excited about what they're building. It's unlike a lot of like kind of legacy businesses, right? I mean, there's always the person who's excited about building the next generation like plumbing device, like nothing wrong with plumbing, or pipes or whatever. But I think what's so fun about food is just there's so much interesting stuff happening here that there's a lot of great people moving into the space.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about that. And our series in general, we're kicking off our fall event series on October 12th. We're bringing back SKS, but we're doing it virtually one day. And this year's theme is sort of reinvention and reimagining the future kitchen, the future of food and cooking. We've put out a call to innovation for folks to really submit their, what the work that they're doing in this new world that we're all living in, to really change how we think about, the when, where, how, and why of how we cook and eat and shop and all of those things. And then we're following that with the Food Tech Leaders Forum on November 3rd in person in Seattle. And then at the end of the year, beginning of 2023, we'll be heading to CES again, to Las Vegas, to have our partnering with the CES folks to have a food tech exhibition and conference. And so we're basically, we're building in all these different opportunities for folks to come together virtually and then in person. And CES is really the place where you're going to see folks demoing and showing off actual products and solutions and really serving the future food that we talk about. And so that who doesn't love when we actually get to touch and feel.
And there's a through line. There's a through line for all these, right? So people who apply for Smart Kitchen Summit to showcase their innovative ideas, if you're chosen, you get a ticket to the Food Tech Leaders Forum. Yeah. So, and then also some of these companies will also be able to go to CES and possibly just participate there, either in the conference or during a dinner. So we wanted to kind of interconnect our fall series from our online event, kind of this big broad call to action for innovation in the kitchen, then bringing together the leaders across the food tech world for an in-person kind of Davos for food tech, and then finally going to the big show in Vegas to kind of talk to the world about what we're hearing and what we're seeing, et cetera. So it's all kind of interconnected, and excited to have people work with us on it. Yeah,
and actually all the details for what we just talked about, like kind of summarize the events and what's going on and how you can get involved, are at smartkitchensummit.com. So if you go there, you'll actually see us kind of lay out what we just talked about, and there'll be forums and places that you can inquire about getting involved and finding out more about each event.
Right. Well, it's kind of I think it's a story worth talking about. It wasn't quite a news story. Like we didn't announce a new restaurant, but I feel like it's just as important as an NFT restaurant or Instant Pot.
It is. Maybe someday we'll have our own NFT, or who knows? We'll see. Only time will tell.
We are going to have some news in that regard. Like there is some kind of Web3 centric news that we're going to be talking about fairly soon. So keep your eyes and ears to the ground, and we'll be talking. Don't put your eyes to the ground. Put your ears to the ground.
That's terrible advice. It's Friday afternoon, so all bets are off here.
I think it's time I wrap it up.
Yeah, we gotta.
I'm not making any sense at this point.
No, I'm gonna send you home early today, I think, and I'll just kick off the weekend.
By the way, if anyone's heard a dog in the background crying,
for the last 8 minutes or so, we've been here.
Like your dog too, because my dog is crying in the background.
No, I can hear your dog crying in the background. And I'm like, oh, Ellie, it's okay. Very lately.
So anyone who's heard like a dog in the background, I'm texting my kids, put the dog outside, and no one's doing anything. That's why I'm not making any sense at this point. So
it's all right.
All right, Ashley.
It was great talking to you. Everybody enjoy, and we'll be talking to you soon.
So that's it for today's show. Thank you to Ashley for joining me and talking about the week's news. The Spoon Podcast is hosted and produced by me, Michael Wolf. The podcast is part of the Spoon Media Network, and if you want to connect with us, just head over to The Spoon at thespoon.tech or drop us a line at podcast@thespoon.tech. at thespoon.tech. And if you haven't already given us a review, you can do so now. Do it this weekend. Do it next week. Whenever you want to, do so at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And as Ashley and I just talked about, we are getting together this year in person. I'm super excited about it to get together with the Spoon community in November at Food Tech Leaders Forum. We'll be bringing together the people leading the food tech revolution. And so if that's you, if you want to connect with people in this space, come on down, come on over. Just head to the Spoon, check out the events page, you can learn more. All right, that's it. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.